It was a wild ride, but the Boris Johnson era in Britain is approaching an end. Hi there, everyone. I'm Jeff, and this is Plain English lesson number 489. Here at Plain English, we help you upgrade your English with current events and trending topics. If you're just listening on a podcast app, welcome, but I recommend you also check out the website where we have a full accompanying lesson. That is posted at plainenglish.com/489, courtesy of JR, our producer. Coming up today, no one is remotely indispensable. With those words, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson resigned after a roller coaster 3 years leading the UK government. We'll trace the rise and fall of this larger-than-life figure. In the second half of the lesson, I'll show you what it means to go after something. And here's a hint. It's not about what goes first and what goes second. Go after, in this sense, means something different. JR also has a song of the week. You might recognize it. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. Boris Johnson is a larger-than-life figure in British politics. His rumpled look, mop of blonde hair, and flair for the dramatic have been a fixture in England for decades. Early in his career, he was a journalist and was once fired for making up a quote before turning to Parliament. He served 2 terms in the early 2000s. He was mayor of London for 8 years and then returned to Parliament in 2015. That's when he threw himself into the biggest question of a generation: whether Britain should leave the EU. He loudly declared himself in favor of leaving, and he led the charge for Brexit. After Britain's stunning vote to leave, Johnson was appointed foreign minister. He eventually rose to prime minister in 2019 on a promise to get Brexit done. He led his party to a convincing majority in the general elections. He got Brexit done as he promised. He navigated COVID-19. He supported the war in Ukraine. He survived scandal after scandal. And then he was toppled this month by a wave of resignations. His personal life during this time was no less tumultuous. Just in the time he was prime minister, 3 years, he got married, had 2 children, and caught COVID-19, for which he was put on a ventilator. Let's take a breath and reflect on the legacy he leaves after this roller coaster ride at the top of British politics. When he took office, his predecessor, Theresa May, had been unsuccessful in negotiating the terms of Britain's exit from the European Union. Johnson did get it done, and he avoided the doomsday scenario that many had feared. Apart from Brexit, he leaves office with 3 major accomplishments to his name. He was an early champion of vaccine development. Britain was one of the first countries to inoculate its citizens against COVID-19. He has coordinated material and financial support for Ukraine after the Russian invasion, and he won his party a thumping majority in the 2019 general election. However, his legacy is likely to be the way he governed. As Prime Minister, as in his campaign for Brexit, he promised everyone they could have all they want. He refused to do the essential work of politics, which is to make choices among competing priorities. In Brexit, for example, many leavers wanted to close the economy off from Europe and the outside world. Others wanted the opposite, to throw open the economy to the freest trade possible. Both supported Brexit for opposite reasons, and Boris Johnson promised both camps that they'd be happy with the final result, and that was impossible. In government, he made a deft decision to go after voters who felt left behind in the small towns of northern England. He promised to level up those regions with new investment, and he won a large majority with their support. But he didn't bother to say where the investment would come from. He didn't detail how the investment would raise those towns' prospects, and he didn't square his promises with another wing of his party that wanted lower taxes and lower spending. Instead, he relied on his own charms and political skill to get him out of these internal contradictions. And for years, it worked. He weaseled out of contradictions, went back on promises, broke agreements, and somehow survived it all. He seemed to have an unlimited number of political lives. On top of all that, there were the scandals, what they call sleaze in the UK. Upon taking office, a party donor paid 200,000 British pounds to refurbish the Prime Minister's residence. That was a violation of election laws. He also supported an obviously corrupt member of Parliament. And then there were the parties, one after another, during the coronavirus lockdown. As details emerged, Boris Johnson's story changed constantly. First, he didn't know about the parties. Then, he knew about them, but he wasn't there. Then, he was there, but he wasn't drinking. Then, he was drinking, but he didn't know it was against the rules. Then, he apologized and was fined. If anything could topple his premiership, it seemed like it would be the parties. Fighting scandals and responding to allegations took up all the energy of his government. But he managed another Houdini act and just barely survived. Some hoped he had been scared straight from his brush with political death. But just weeks later, another scandal emerged. He appointed someone to his government with a history of sexual harassment. That person was most recently accused of groping two guests at a dinner party. This member of parliament, Chris Pincher, his real name, had faced similar allegations in the past, and he denies the misconduct. Well, Boris Johnson initially denied that he knew about the past allegations when he appointed Pincher to his position. Then, Johnson said he knew about the allegations, but that they weren't serious. Then, it emerged that they were serious and did result in disciplinary action years ago. Then, Johnson admitted he had been briefed about it at the time, and he said he simply forgot, and he finally apologized. Well, this was too much, even for his most loyal ministers, who said he was no longer fit to govern. Minutes after Johnson apologized for this latest scandal, the finance and health ministers resigned their posts. Over the next days, dozens of other ministers would resign from the government. About a third of all appointed posts stood vacant, paralyzing the government. 2 ministers resigned just 36 hours after they were appointed. So many ministers quit that the BBC kept a ticking counter of resignations on the bottom of its screen. Even in resignation, Johnson attempted another escape act. He said he would resign, but he would still lead the government until October, when a new leader of the Conservative Party could be selected. In researching this lesson, I discovered a new style of journalism being practiced in the UK, and it's a timeline, and these are common. They go something like this. There's a description of a scandal at the beginning, and then there's a heading for each day for like a week or two where they trace the arc of the Prime Minister's story from denial to apology. And day by day, heading by heading on these websites, you can see the story changing. On one of our live calls with Plain English Plus members, someone asked about Al Gore, our former vice president years ago here, Al Gore. And I casually mentioned that Al Gore never could get over the sense that he was boring. And I realized when I was saying that the world could really use a few boring leaders right now, Britain especially. So this is a really good phrasal verb today, go after. I'm saying it's really good not because you'll use it a lot, but because there aren't a lot of great alternatives to this phrase. To go after something is to try to get something that others are also trying to get. I'll repeat that. It means to try to get something that others are also trying to get. Boris Johnson was promoted to Prime Minister via a party election in 2019. Then he called a general election, hoping to win more seats for his party. Now, during that election, he went after voters in parts of England that felt left behind. Those voters had supported the Labour Party for decades. But Boris Johnson, as leader of the Conservatives, went after those voters. He pursued them. He was competing for something that others, the Labour Party specifically, were also competing for. He went after those voters. Go after the top job means to try to get the top job. Try to get it because others are also competing for it. Boris Johnson had served in Theresa May's government as foreign minister, but soon he decided to go after the top job. After Theresa May resigned, Johnson campaigned for the Conservative Party leadership. He went after it. He competed against other people for the top job, and he won. Who will go after the top job now? There will undoubtedly be a lot of candidates. But if I were a British politician, I don't think I'd go after the top job now. Boris Johnson left a lot of chaos in his wake. I don't think I'd want to be the one to clean it all up now. Have you heard of Instagram Reels? Reels are Instagram's new short-form videos. They're going after users that like to consume short videos, like they see on TikTok. There are social media users who like this. TikTok is going after them. Now, Instagram is going after them. And YouTube has a new product called YouTube Shorts. They are all going after people who like watching these short videos one after another. They're all pursuing, competing for, trying to get the same thing. So we say those social media companies are going after those people. Were any of you lifeguards as kids? Here in the US, the job market is so competitive that a lot of pools and beaches can't find enough teenage lifeguards. That was one of the classic summer jobs for teenagers. You got paid really well, and most of the time, you didn't have to do too much actual work, and you could get a good tan in the process. But now, towns searching for lifeguards are going after a new pool of potential workers, senior citizens. Now, maybe a senior citizen isn't the best choice on a beach with big waves, but retirees are often good lifeguards at community pools. The towns are going after them. In this job market, there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of people competing for talent. Well, now, community pools are competing for these older workers. They are trying to get these workers as others try to get them too. So we say the pools are going after the older workers. JR has selected a song of the week. Listening to music is a great way to engage in some passive English learning. More on that in a minute. Today's song is All My Days by Alexi Murdoch. As soon as I pressed play on this song, I recognized it. It has been in a lot of TV shows: Grey's Anatomy, Scrubs, Sense8. I didn't watch any of those, but I instantly recognized the song, so I know I heard it somewhere. But I have a feeling that JR picked it because it's in a new series called Conversations with Friends. So see if you recognize this one. It's called All My Days by Alexi Murdoch. Thanks, JR, for that song selection this week. I forgot to mention before that you can go after your dreams. That means to pursue your dreams, try to get them. Maybe it's not a direct competition with someone else, but to achieve your dreams, you have to work at it and pursue what you want. You have to go after it. And if your dreams involve English, the best way to go after your dreams is with active learning. Listening to podcasts, listening to songs, watching movies, that's all good stuff, but it's passive learning. To make real progress, you want to be an active learner. And to help you along with that, I prepared a short video on how to become a more active learner. Check your email for a link to that, but if you're not getting the emails, you can still see the video at plainenglish.com/active. There are some great tips in there about how to turn some everyday things into active exercises, and a lot of them are totally free. So check out that video. It's not long, just 5 minutes on the intro, and then the full video is about 30 minutes. You can get it all by going to plainenglish.com/active, ACTIVE, plainenglish.com/active, or just click the link in the notes to this lesson in your podcast app. That's all for today. We'll be back on Monday with a new lesson. See you then.